Intersectionality. Big word, and we're just going to break that down. So here's an image of a really complicated sort of freeway interchange. It's kind of like an intersection, but you can see that there's not just one little road or one little lane, but there's many lanes, many roads, all this different direction. It almost looks like spaghetti. And we're kind of like that. So that's, to put it really simply, what intersectionality means. It's acknowledging that we're not just one thing, we're many things all woven together. We have different parts of our identity, and they're all important, and they all kind of work together to make us uniquely who we are. Now, here's a little video about it.
Intersectionality. Have you heard this word before? Even if you have, you might not know what it means. Let's take a look at it. The first part's easy enough. Intersection, a place where things come together. Intersectionality refers to the reality that we all have multiple identities that intersect to make us who we are. It also gives us a way to talk about oppressions and privileges that overlap and reinforce each other. This term dates back to the 1980s and legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw. She noticed that we didn't have an effective way to talk about how the experiences of Black women are different from the experiences of Black men and of white women. How? Black women endure both gender discrimination and racial discrimination. Over the last 30 years, scholars, educators, and activists have expanded the use of the word intersectionality to talk about identities beyond race and gender. Let's look at a few examples. Jerry has a disability, and his family lives below the poverty line. He is the oldest of 10, which requires him to do a lot of caregiving and sometimes keeps him out of school. No one in the school counseling office has talked to Jerry or his parents about his plans for after graduation. He has applied for several jobs, but never gets called back. Fatima is Muslim and recently came to the United States from Somalia. She finds that many people at her school make assumptions about her values and abilities before they speak to her. Many of her classmates think she shouldn't be at their school at all. Greta comes from an affluent family. Both her parents and grandparents went to college, and her father owns a successful business. She doesn't think about her identity very often, but she does think of herself as someone who will go to college and get a good job once she graduates. Think about Greta's situation as opposed to Fatima's or Jerry's. Fatima and Jerry are members of marginalized groups. They don't get to choose whether or not to think about their identities. Greta, on the other hand, can ignore intersectionality if she wants to. Life isn't the same for everyone, even for people who share identity characteristics. By adopting an intersectional lens, we have a better opportunity to understand why and to change the institutions that help and harm us based on who we are. Want to learn more? Read our story, Teaching at the Intersections, in the summer 2016 issue of Teaching Tolerance magazine.
All right. Now, I just want to clarify and give us some examples of what those intersecting identities are. Because in that video, they went over race, religion, ability, maybe social class, like how much money someone's family has, right? Those were things that we heard mentioned in these three little claymation people. But there's, again, a lot more to us than that. So I'm not going to read all of these, but you can always just pause this if you rewatch it on your own. Pause it and take a look. So race and ethnicity are two different things. You might notice Mexican is not listed in race, and that's not a mistake. Race is a different thing. You might have heard it called a social construct. It's kind of more to do with color than it is about culture. So, an ethnicity, a lot of times ethnicities could be a nationality, like you could be a Mexican citizen, or like in my family, there are Mexican heritage but American citizens, right? Okay, so those are different. Um, I think those are the only things I like really need to point out. Kind of interesting to think about some of these things. Um, you can't really help but have people notice, and other are maybe a little bit below the surface. Like you might think at first, oh, like disability, people are that's something that you can always see, but that's really not necessarily true. Um, because a person's mental health, they could be mentally ill, and in that sense, have a disability. But you might not see that the same way you could see someone's body type or body size. Citizenship, that's one that's also kind of hidden. So, one little note on race. This is a screenshot straight from the 2020 census page. I just Googled census and race, and I just want to show you how complicated this is. White includes people who are from Europe, ethnic groups from Europe, also the Middle East, and also North Africa. And now it's listing a bunch of different people. Chaldeans would, according to census things, be white as far as race. Lebanese, white. Slavic, Iranian, those are people from Persia, would need to check the box for white as their race. So you can see, again, ethnicity and race, very different. Ethnicity is really about culture. Race is color. Culture versus color. And then just a little plug down here. If your family hasn't responded to the census, that's really important. It helps our communities to be counted in the right way, so that everybody is seen and not invisible. All right, here are two definitions of intersectionality. If you just like to see straight up regular old dictionary definition on a slide, I've got that there for you. Um, you can like not know all these words, but mainly think about social categories and then overlapping and interdependent, right? Overlapping and interdependent, right? Just like that picture of that road where it's going each way and one's over and one's under the other. It's all kind of connected, right? Complex and cumulative. That's saying, like, for example, if a person is in more than one marginalized groups, like say if instead of being able-bodied they have a physical disability and they identify as transgender, and they are I don't know, a black or indigenous person of color, then all those little things are gonna kind of overlap, maybe to make life not as easy potentially, but also to make their experience even more especially unique. All right, now, how does this intersectional lens fit in with the name poems that we started last week? This is one of the poems. That was an example from the example slide, and I screenshot it here. So if we're looking at this intersectionally, we can kind of go a little bit deeper than the regular sort of style of saying, oh, well, let's look at this poem. What do we like? What do we know about Mary now? And I could be like, oh, well, I know Mary's name is Mary, and then her grandma has her name too, and ta-da, that's kind of it, right? Um, but if we're looking at this intersectionally, it's kind of like we're doing more complex dive into investigating who Mary is and what is important to her and her identity. One thing that I noticed right away is this second stanza starts with Mary, Mother of God. And I was like, whoa, is she like praying right now? What's this? So I can infer from this that Mary, the author of this poem, is probably Catholic, at least Christian, and that's something that's important to her because um, it's kind of like a decent sized section of her poem, and where she puts it also shows that that's an important part of what makes her her. Other things that I can see about her identity, in her family, she's a middle child, so that seems like that's something that's important to her. Um, but yeah, that's one thing I notice. I I would guess that maybe Mary doesn't have a strong connection to a culture or to a different language or anything like that, because I don't see anything other than English. There's no fun like words from her home language, and I don't see her mention any uh, foods that might be unique or special to a culture, right? So seems like that's not a part of her identity that's very important to her. Okay, so that's taking this intersectionality work, applying it to the name poem. And one more time, ending where we started. Intersectionality is that idea that just as you know that there are many things that make you who you are, things that we can see right away, things that maybe only someone really looking for certain details can see. And then there are other parts of what makes you you that nobody could see, that we can only know by getting to know you or by talking with you.